Listen, okay. Thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to quickly start with introductions. Let's start with you, Sonja. Just a quick, who you are, what do you do for a living?
My favorite question,
Yes.
Lofne. Sonja Blignaut. I am a practitioner of complexity. Let me put it that way. So probably the shortest way to say what I do is I help people become more comfortable in uncertainty and continuously changing contexts.
You've been doing this for years and it wasn't really that big until now.
Yeah, I like to say I've been working with complexity before it became cool.
Yes.
So I've been doing it for about 25 years, yeah.
But what was interesting is your background. You studied meteorology, no?
Meteorology, yes.
Why did you decide on that?
Long story, but to please my dad, who told me I needed to become a scientist. You know, it's quite a common story, I think. And I've always loved extreme weather. I had this very naive perspective that meteorologists are like the storm chasers in the US. And then when the reality hit me that all I'll be doing is like simulating those weather systems on a computer, it was like, this isn't for me.
Very interesting. But I think that base knowledge is very interesting. Stephen?
Yeah, so currently I'm an account manager with Salesforce. Prior to that, I was working as a solutions architect, but found myself just being involved in projects overseas. I like being part of this economy. I moved from the UK to South Africa 15 years ago now, where I was working for SAP. And yeah, I think that this is a very exciting place to be. It's a very exciting place to do business. So following the account management side, prior to that, I built up a practice, a CX practice at Brighthouse, now part of NTT. But yeah, my fascination is that interface between people, process, and technology. I'm a no solid believer that one thing does the change. It's the balance of those three things that cause the change. And that's, why I'm here.
Let me remind people who's listening that it was actually your conversation around the Indian curry.
A lot of good things started around a curry, Lochner, and this is where we are.
That sparked the idea for a podcast. Karin, just again yourself for the guests.
My name's Karin. I'm a psychologist, and I'm learning a lot on this podcast, enjoying it. It's really interesting to hear, and I'm looking forward to what you have to share today.
Thank you. So listen, what's interesting I thought about this morning was our first podcast. I remember the tone was, it's such an exciting time because the bond markets are growing, the rand dollar is strengthening, the gold price is just going to the roof, and it's the time now to be assertive and invest and whatever the case might be. Now I think it's 2 months later, and now all of a sudden it's like, and I think it's a good. That quote you had to. Who's Michael Mead, by the way? Anyway,
he's a mythologist. Very interesting. Yeah, he works with myths and.
But he said, you quoted it on one of your stuff that I listened to. I can't remember. To be alive in this time is to be in the liminal phase of a collective rite of passage. It's deep. It's really deep. Which is cool for me because I never had the opportunity to go to the army. And my parents always said, if you didn't go to the army, you never went through the rite of passage to be a man. But it feels like we are in a bit of a rite of passage, and the people who can navigate this wisely and intelligently or have some form of a rite of passage. Can you please just define liminal before we start? Or everybody can pause and just Google it. But what does liminal mean? Liminal space?
So the best way to describe it, I think, is with an analogy or with a metaphor. But it essentially means you're in a threshold space. So it's like the cocoon. It's this in-between space where what used to be is no longer accessible, but what will be hasn't happened yet. So it's this in-between misty space that people find very uncomfortable. So that's a brief.
And do you, in your meetings, and I've got you here because you do a lot of, call it vendor-like meetings with customers, do you sense that reality, that liminal space in the decision-making process?
Yeah, I think that there's less of the phenomenon of I'm doing something. There's more the tension, that noumenal tension of saying I need to do something, but how and where and why is the challenge. And in a relatively short space of time, it's gone from how can I replace systems with a technology like AI to how can I get the best out of AI to help me make decisions. And that's been a very positive shift in a relatively short space of time. But the counterpoint is there's so many technologies out there that there's almost a parallax that happens. So I think that's the bit that I'm helping customers try and navigate is, yes, there is a lot of technology. And obviously I'm coming from a vendor angle to say, well, we represent one angle. But what is your thinking around the fabric of your business? And what is the opportunity to replace and enhance? And try and keep it in the process space and move it out of the technology space as much. I mean, ultimately, yes, I have to go behind a technology, but let's frame the conversation a little bit better around the fabric of your organization and the fabric this technology is set to enhance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Karine, I'm just thinking on what he's saying. We spoke about it, the last episode was type of personalities who's now successful versus those old titans. I'm just wondering, these conversations in this liminal space, what type of person is good for this time? You know, what space does a person need to be in? What childhood trauma should they not have?
Look,
You know, is it people with ADHD or without? Is it?
good question. The thing that's been going through my mind as you're speaking is almost like I've heard a lot of talk recently where people say, we introduced computers in school and everybody went, yeah, computers. And then the new research now says, okay, shucks, we might be producing a generation that's like less smart, and I think it's because of computers. And so my generation parent right now is thinking, great, so we remove computers altogether and we go back to what we knew, right? Which is what you're saying. If you're in this space, you either yearn for what was or you get really excited about what's coming. And I think that's where the personality difference comes in. I think there are personalities, if we think about some Myers-Briggs types, you know, that enjoy systems that work, tradition, predictability, and they are energized, visionary personalities that love change and want to go with it. So there will be quite a divide. But the question wouldn't necessarily be, are we now catering for the one or the other? But maybe what can we do to accommodate the shadow side of both? You know, because often visionary excitement also comes with impulsivity. And ADHD, right? And
executive function.
And on the other side, for those who find security in predictability and things that work, and I guess you could add the trauma side there, change becomes quite a scary thing.
Yeah.
Now, what is this going to do to my nervous system?
Because it's interesting, I mentioned it earlier, I think it was Robin. Fisher said it, probably, I can't remember, 5-6 years ago, where he said, our biggest competitor is not another big software vendor, it's indecision.
Yep.
It's not making a decision. And it sounds like, I don't know if you can maybe expand a little bit on that. When people are in this liminal space, facing this complexity, because there is complexity in being in that space, can you give any advice to our listeners? Like, listen, what do we need to do? And I think I like that forest story of yours. I kind of, I don't know if you can bring that forest in, but it's up to you.
I think the thing is, what happens is we've been socialized in certain ways. So, for example, if you're in a senior leadership role, you need to be decisive and you need to get things right and you need to have answers. I think that is, so there's this pressure that you need to know. So we've almost made knowing and being competent the same thing. And now what's happened is the environment has shifted. It's not like you've become incompetent over time or just overnight. The external context has shifted. So especially the people that you mentioned, Karine, that's comfortable with, certainty, with predictability and stability, that's dissolving. And so there are still areas where you can have it, but overall there's fewer and fewer. And so I think the one thing is almost to understand that it's not necessarily you, it's the environment. And if you can let go of this thing of I have to know. Because there are things, and this is one of the things in complexity, is you're dealing with unknown unknowns. And nobody knows. So it's not a judgment on you. Nobody can know. And so when you kind of step into that, then it becomes, okay, how do we find our way together? And this is, I think, where maybe the forest metaphor comes in, because, and maybe I'll take a step back from the forest. One of my blog posts that got quite a bit of traction, the headline was, "It's hard to survive in the jungle if you were trained in a zoo." And I think that's still quite a apt analogy, because it's almost like the zoo cages have opened and we can see the wild, but we don't feel safe. But now, in the past, we had the option to stay in the zoo. Now we can't. And so what do we do when we're in a forest or in the wild where there are no paths? We need to make them. And for some, this is exciting, and for others, it is very scary. But I think just coming into the present moment and saying, I don't know, but let's find out together.
Yeah.
And then make the path by walking. I think that's the invitation.
I think the one thing I'm observing in the field is when that pressure comes down, there's a certain personality type that wants to err towards that certainty. And their tension is, I can't provide everything that was certain with a new technology. The other side is, well, this is just so exciting. This is everything we can do. It's running into the jungle. And where I see the midpoint being is you've got a technology which is really good at generating or assessing content and coming up with a guide. How can these technologies be companion technologies rather than outcome technologies? And I think that is a good framework to move forward with this process. And I go back to one of the best clients I've ever worked with, where we were going through a project and we found that we were just spending too much time on fringe cases to build something that was unbreakable, that would deal with a really bad case study. And the customer was a retailer. And we kept on going back to, what if a kid walks into the store and a lintel falls on their foot and the CEO finds out via LinkedIn? I'm going, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And we landed up building up all these acceptance criteria in the sort of agile framework. And I'm going, this is pretty fringe. Now, I wasn't directly, but it was my team that was executing the project. So we came back to the playback, and the customer, because like the ultimate, exec, was like, where's this going? And he obviously he knew the personality types that were involved with why this fringe case became so prevalent. And he came around and he turned things around so brilliantly. And he says, all I want is a system where my people can honor a promise. And I thought that was brilliant. And it's something I bring into conversations, whether I'm working with customers at the start of the cycle or where I was before, which was more kind of in the execution framework. Can you honor a promise? Then there's a sort of deeper question with these changes. What are your new promises? Of the 10 rules that you have, what are the 2 you're going to lose and the 2 you're prepared to bring in? And I think that is a nice framework to find yourself in, because it's brilliantly framed. It's that fringe between the zoo and the forest. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's easy to deliver on your promises in the zoo.
Yeah, but you have to deliver on promises in the jungle. And I think the best thing to do is use your technology as a companion rather than a total, here's the standard operating procedures and off you go. It's the reason why I think in the military environment, elite regiments are small, because you train people to make decisions on the fly. And I think sometimes with the new technology, you've got to go small, and you've got to take small sorties into the jungle instead of trying to march a whole army in there.
Yeah, you need to shift to being much more experimental. And I'll build on your analogy there. I think sometimes we want to use these technologies. One of my favorite terms is we outsource our relationship with uncertainty to certainty merchants. And we make these technologies, we want it to be a map or a GPS versus a compass. and I think it's a completely different, and then also, as you say, be more experimental. Don't try and get everything right in the beginning. Just take a step and then learn, reorient, take another one.
And I think I can testify, and you can as well, for anybody who's listening thinking they're way behind. Nobody's really way behind. My experience has been when you speak to medium, bigger size customers, they're behind and they're anxious. And when I say they're behind, it's because yesterday I was on a call with a customer and I asked them to bring up their forecast. And it's a big, almost $1 billion company. And they bring up a spreadsheet. That's not even in the cloud. It's on somebody updates it, and then they send it off to somebody else and they need to update it and playing human router. But they're successful, but they now all of a sudden they've got this urge. And I think something I want to quote you on as well, Sonja. Complexity consciousness is not something we learn, but something we remember. It's a felt sense that we are not outside complexity, but entangled within it. So what I'm sensing is that people want to do something, they don't know exactly what, but it's almost as if it's based in some memory of how things should be or could be. I don't know if I can, if you can run on that a little bit.
One of my frustrations, is it feels like we've made complexity this thing that sits somewhere outside of us, and we've labeled it, things like wicked problems, and, we problematize it. But we've always been in complexity. We're in complexity now. We don't know where this conversation's going. It's emergent. So we are present. We know that things are slightly unknown here. But when children, and you probably will be able to say much more about this, but children are naturally complexity fit. They're curious. They don't need certainty. It's taught out of us. But then also, when you go home to your wife, you don't go with a spreadsheet, and you don't have targets that you set, and you don't expect certainty. So in social contexts, and when we parent, we bring that complexity consciousness, but then we step over the threshold into the workplace, and all of a sudden we expect everything to be very predictable and certain. And so our bodies know how to be in complexity. Our minds get tangled because we want to be certain and we want to know. And if you try and figure the complexity out, that's when you get tangled. So I think if you almost normalize, you've always been in complexity. Your body's complex. I mean, your mind is one of the most complex things. Consciousness itself is complex. So if you can just normalize that, then you can be in that liminality, in that continuous change. But as long as you expect certainty and stability, it's going to not go so well for you.
But Sonja, why do you think we do that? Why do we have an expectation that we have to get out of complexity? Are we scared we're going to fail, or scared we're not going to make enough money, or what? Why did we unlearn that?
I think it's many things, but I think over time we've become addicted to certainty. We like things to be predictable. We like stability. If you think about it, the last few decades, so let's say after the Second World War, we've had this almost like an abnormal time of relative stability, and we've gotten used to it. And now we have all of these predictive technologies as well. So I think it's Esther Perel. I was listening to one of her podcasts. And she said, we are living in this form of assisted living, where Spotify tells you what to listen to, Netflix tells you what to watch. It's like we no longer make decisions ourselves. And so now we're kind of live in this world where we expect everything to be stable and certain. And so we've almost unlearned how to be with uncertainty. And we don't like discomfort.